Hey, welcome to A Valid Answer with Scott and Marshall. It's where a pastor and an atheist get together and have philosophical discussions about current events. And so far, these discussions have not broken into a fist fight. So
they come close. Certainly on social media.
Yeah, so social media, our discussions on Facebook and social media I have actually not quite unfriended you, but what was it? I stopped listening. I can't remember what it is on there.
You unfollow.
I unfollowed you.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just cannot.
You just can't do it.
You and I face to face, we do really good because we're human beings. We're human
Yeah.
beings and we're facing each other and we're friends. We love each other. We're friends. We're good friends. We've been friends since high school. But once that the face is no longer in front of you, it can become very volatile. And there was a point where I did not like our discussions online compared to our discussions face to face. So I just said, at this point, I don't want to have any discussions online until we can meet again and stay off each other's
So
throats.
what we're going to do is we're going to have discussions basically face to face and put them online.
Yes. And you'll have a chance as a listener to participate, because we know that's how many times have you been listening to somebody else's discussion and you're like, you should say this right now, right? So we're gonna have a spot coming up where you can write in to avalidanswer@gmail.com, avalidanswer@gmail.com, and we're gonna have a little session in our future podcast called "You Should Have Said." So this is your chance to say, Scott, you should have said this to Marshall. Marshall, you should have said this to Scott.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we can read those, discuss them, tell you why you were wrong. That's what we do all the time. We tell each other why we're wrong. But there are a few rules to our discussions that we've agreed upon. And I don't think we've even made these rules official. Just our natural tendency, you and I have this natural tendency that you have to be intellectually honest. There's no intellectual dishonesty allowed in our face-to-face discussions, because we're going to call each other on our bull crap. We're going to try our best, because I just said bull crap. We're going to try our best not to cuss on this podcast. Hopefully our discussions don't devolve into name calling. I mean, I might call you a heathen, but
guilty,
right? I
might call you a Christian.
I was going to say, I might call you a godless heathen, but that's kind of redundant.
Right?
But we're not going to divulge into name calling or anything like that, because we are good friends. We went to high school together and we've known each other for 20. We're going to blur that 20 some odd years.
Yeah. Well, I think what we want to do is we want to share some perspective with people. There's a lot of people don't understand atheists or atheism. They think that atheists are, some sort of, these godless, moralist monsters who, what stops you from, eating babies or what have you, if you don't believe in God and stuff like this. And so there's a lot of myths about atheists. Atheists are less popular and less trusted than many other groups. Even convicted criminals tend to have a higher trust rate in society than atheists do.
But I think that atheists still have a higher trustworthy rate than Congress.
Well, yeah, that's a given. I don't know if you can go much lower than that,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and it's mind-boggling, I think it's Pew does these surveys where they're like, would you hire this person, or would you be comfortable if your daughter or son wanted to marry this person? And almost invariably at the bottom 2 or 3 categories is always atheist. And you're like, really? I didn't know we were such monsters.
Yeah.
And so part of it is to kind of dispel some of that.
That's part of what it is. You're not a monster.
Right.
At the same time, I can't remember who does this quote, but it's at the beginning of a old 90s Christian song by DC Talk, but it's a quote that says the greatest single cause of atheism in the world is Christians.
Right.
Who live one way by their words, but live another way by their actions. And a lot of times Christians, in the eyes of a lot of mainstream and atheists and everything, Christians have a bad reputation that is generally self-inflicted by Christians. And there's a lot of times where I want to be able to stand up and say, that is not what you're doing is not what Christianity is about. And I want to be able to, there's a lot of misconceptions also about Christianity. Unfortunately, most of them are perpetuated by Christians. So.
And I think there's, I forgot what I was going to say. I think you were just talking about, I lost a train of thought.
Sorry.
And that sometimes happens. That's going to happen on here too. So we are only human.
Yep.
I want people to know that I certainly don't speak for all atheists, that there are atheists who believe in ghosts and other supernatural things, where they just don't believe in God. And even I don't fully understand how that works, but there is a broad spectrum. There's a whole periodic table of atheism out there. And I do
Obviously
not,
with Christianity too.
right, and I only speak for myself. I did remember what I was going to say. I was going to say, I think a lot of self-described Christians are what I call functional atheists, which is they're Christian on Sunday, or they're Christian on Easter, Christmas, what have you, or they're Christian when they're sad or beat up upon in
Or when
life.
it's convenient.
Yeah, exactly. But day-to-day life, they live as atheists. You know, they have sex before marriage. They don't necessarily love their neighbor. At least it doesn't show up in their everyday behavior. And so those people, I think, are functional atheists. And I'm not necessarily judging them.
Non-believing believers.
Precisely. They
That's what we say
don't
in
believe or they don't behave as though
Christianese.
God is real.
Yeah.
And when you see that, you're like, it tears down the whole idea that there is a God and that God is there. Because if God was really there, you would be terrified
To act
of
the way
some
you
of
are.
your behaviors. Yep. Exactly. You know, and a lot of people, I'm like, you're an atheist. You just don't realize it. You go to church because that's your culture. That's your habit. Yep. That's what your friends and neighbors expect you to do.
But it
you
may
don't
not
want to
necessarily
disappoint mom.
It may not necessarily be your lifestyle.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And I'm not judging people for that, because obviously I am an atheist, so I kind of have an atheist lifestyle. But, you know, if you're going to walk the walk.
Do we want to get into that at all? No.
I mean, if you're going to talk the talk, you want to walk the walk, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing, you know. But it is possible, I think, to live a decent life without belief in God.
Cool.
You know?
I believe there are decent people like you who don't have a belief in God, but it still makes you're still a decent person. From my perspective, I do feel that you are lost, and as a friend, I'm hoping that I can help you discover that. But it doesn't make you an evil person. Doesn't mean that you and I can't get together and have discussions and intellectual discussions. And that's another thing, is that so many people and atheists that I've dealt with before, progressive liberals and atheists, have a tendency to think that most Christians are uneducated, and have this idea that, well, that Christians don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to rationality.
Right.
And you and I, you've seen that in me, that no, it's very easy to be a rational Christian. Most of them who are vocal out there in the community are not, unfortunately, and that's what leads to the prevalent belief that Christians are very irrational. But faith and belief actually has a very good standing in rationality, and being able to have rational discussions and intellectual discussions, I believe is, I mean, we don't want to be arguing about little minutia things, but I think it's important for Christians to be able to have rational discussions with non-believers. Otherwise, if you're not able to rationally discuss things, then they're not going to listen to you. Non-believers are not going to listen to you if everything you're talking about as a Christian is in Christianese and emotionally Christianese and emotionally based, you know. And it just feels this way, and you know, the hairs on my arm stood up, and I just knew it was, you know, I just knew
the Holy Spirit.
And there are those moments. I'm not knocking spiritual moments, and if we ever get into me telling my personal story, it's completely entirely based on faith and stepping out in what I know God said to me in prayer. And that's one of the things that brought us together years ago, is I told you, here's what I'm doing in my life. And you're like, you're crazy. And I said, but watch and see if it doesn't come out right, because I know this is what God has told me to do. So I'm not knocking the spiritualness of things. I'm not knocking God speaking to us as Christians when we align our lives to hear his voice in our lives. But at the same time, we can still have rational discussions. The tough part is, the dichotomy of the discussions, because I believe, as in political terms, as an American, there's certain things that I believe that our government should or should not do. But as a Christian, that it might be the opposite of what I should personally do. It's very difficult to stand as a conservative when people say, doesn't God say to look out for your neighbor? How come you're against, raising taxes against the rich to pay for, and I'm like, yes, it's my job as a Christian. God sees me, and it's my job as a Christ follower to take care of my neighbor. But I can separate what I'm supposed to do and what God has called me to do personally from what I believe our government is responsible to do.
Well, I got some DMV tags sitting at home. I'm just saying, Scott.
So so again, a little more into the so-called rules of, for those of you not watching, I did air quotes, the so-called rules of our discussions is that we call each other out on our logical fallacies. We don't let the other person, we try not, unless we don't catch it. And again, if one of us says something that's a logical fallacy and we didn't get caught on it, that's your chance to catch us and write in to a valid answer at gmail.com and say, hey, here's what you should have said. Should have called Scott on his BS.
Yeah, this is not a polished or practiced podcast.
I don't have notes.
And this is one of the things that I've come to learn is that even, you take someone like Richard Dawkins and you take famous people, celebrities in like atheism or in Christianity, and there's going to be a lot of fallacies behind the scenes. There's going to be a lot of errors. It's kind of like watching sausage being made. It's a very messy process. Yeah. And a lot of times what you see on air and it does, what you see in the books that they publish and stuff is the polished front, the facade, if you will, that you're getting just the gems, and the gems are polished and they look beautiful. But in real life, everybody's human. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you are the most famous megachurch pastor or Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris or any of the great atheist speakers that are out there. But there's going to be a lot of errors in your thinking and in the things that you say. Things are going to come off the cuff are not going to sound very, very polished. And you're getting sort of the rough gems here. Yep. These are not. We're not going to be polished. We're not going to be perfect. I'm going to make logical fallacies. Scott's going to make logical fallacies. We're going to make errors. But the idea is that in the process of going behind the scenes and watching the sausage get made, you gain a greater appreciation for the final product. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, mainly the thing is, it's very easy to look at the opposing side and say they're evil. They're stupid, they're uneducated, they're this, they're that. And I know I have looked at the other side and said, how can you be so stupid? Oh, they're just evil. Oh, they're just da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. But then when I sit down at a table across from you, Marshall, my friend of 20 some odd years, I don't think you're stupid. And I don't think you're evil. And I don't think you're a bad person. And if we all could just realize that at the other side of that keyboard, on the other side of that microphone, on the other side of that computer screen, whatever it is, the person that you are so adamantly against philosophically is still a human being, is still a person, and might even be in any other circumstance your best friend. Could very well be in any other circumstance a friend that you hang out with, have breakfast with, do things with, go to their house and play board games with. Yeah, you know what I mean? As we do, we've done all that, and still be adamantly opposed philosophically in our beliefs, but realizing that that other person is not your enemy.
Right, and that's
what this podcast is really about. It's like you're not my enemy. The other side is not the enemy.
Yeah, there's a great poem, and I honestly can't remember the author. And if this were scripted, I'd be able to read it.
You pull it out and have your notes.
I'd have the notes. But the guy talks about, ranged as infantry, I shot at him, and as he at me. But had we met in a tavern, I would have helped him to a drink. I would have bought him a drink. And that's the way things are. And I think a lot of that is artificially constructed by our society and by the powers that be, where we're pitted against each other over these artificial things so that we're shooting at labels. I'm attacking you because you're conservative. You're attacking me because I'm liberal. And it's conservative versus liberal, and it's never human with human. And when you lose that humanity, and it's label versus label, all kinds of monstrosities can happen because you dehumanize your opponent, and
what happens is that
yourself.
You and all of that, you limit your intellectual discussion, because that's just a meme now. This is why I'm really against memes at all. Because memes are never really about what's really going on. It's just look, I got,
it's a soundbite.
It's a soundbite and it's a jab, and it's usually a straw man. It's usually setting up
a lot of times. Yes, you're right.
It's setting up your opponent's argument.
But I do like memes.
See, and that's where we differ.
Yeah.
I don't like them simply because it's very easy to be intellectually dishonest with them. And when that happens, when the other person on the other side of the microphone or the keyboard or the screen, whatever it is, or what would you say, the ranged artillery,
arranged as infantry.
Arranged as infantry,
set, an opposing line shooting at each other.
When that happens, that it then limits your arguing abilities. It limits you because that's just the person to put down instead of having to face that person and realize, okay, my easy, quick put down of the other side doesn't work because I know this person. So now I got to think deeper about my discussion, think deeper about my point, and really think deeper about what do I really believe, because I can no longer just fire that quick shot because this is my friend.
Yeah.
And if we can just get everybody to do that. That's why I want of this podcast is I want this to get out, and I want people to see that it's possible to have these intellectual discussions among friends and not digress into just firing shots across the bow.
Yeah.
So this is our first podcast. It's kind of the pilot episode. So we're going to kind of, start light, not hit anything too heavy. We're just going to just go and talk about gun control.
Oh, okay, that one. Oh, all right. Well, yeah.
It's relevant. I really
relevant.
didn't want to go in that heavy, but I mean, we're not going to hit the whole thing. But it is something that's relevant, that's happening in the news right now. Again, we don't have any notes, and we've been watching stuff and everything like that. But again, we're not trying to. I mean, yes, we are kind of trying to change each other's opinions, but you're not going to change each other's opinions by battling it out
head to head.
Head.
That's simple psychology.
Yeah.
It never works that way.
But but those of you watching, you might see a viewpoint that you never heard before from him, or you might see a viewpoint that you never heard from me. And
but he's wrong, just so you know.
And on that note, let's start our intellectual discussion.
Okay.
Go ahead.
What? I didn't prepare a speech. I don't know.
What have we been talking about online?
Well, online we've been going back and forth about whether, how do you address this problem? Just so our viewers know, because you're going to be viewing this many months, maybe even years after this recording. Just last week there was a mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, I think is the name of the school. 17 people
victims
were killed. With a firearm. Now, what's the proper term for the firearm? Because I know that the gun people get really uppity if you call it an assault rifle or what have it, which it's not.
It's not.
I refer to it in my own thinking as a high-powered hunting rifle.
Technically, you would refer to it, again, it's a rifle. If the barrel's shorter than 20 inches, it's a carbine. That's basically what it is.
Okay, and I understand that.
And most of them are. Most of the AR-15s that you buy nowadays are not full length.
Do we know
so usually
the caliber of the firearm?
I don't know what the caliber exactly was of the one that was used in the shooting, but the standard caliber of an AR-15 rifle is a .223 caliber. It's about the same size as a .22. The .223 is the same size as a .22, basically. It's a rifle cartridge, so it has a larger more powder in the cartridge that's behind
and the grain of the powder is going to be different.
The grain count of the powder is going to be. You have a .22 that's only an inch long, whereas a .223 is probably about 3 or 4 inches long, and I might be off on my measurements.
And the muzzle velocity is really a big thing, right?
The muzzle velocity is a big thing, and this is again something that we were talking about because of that article that had been posted by a doctor who was working on the wounds and stuff like that.
And she was saying the muzzle velocity was very high
compared to pistols, pistol ammunition. Yeah.
What the doctor, who I guess she operated on some of these patients who arrived at the trauma center, and she said that several of them, there was really nothing they could do because the bullet would hit a vital organ like the liver, and it just vaporized the liver.
Yeah, because of the muzzle velocity, the energy being imparted, the cavitation. Going through of the air being pushed out of the way.
So we got some facts established here.
Yeah. But and again, a .223 is actually on the low end of rifle cartridges. It was actually picked by NATO to be the main rifle round, as I understand, because of its wounding ability, not because of its killing ability. Before they had much higher velocities and much larger calibers.
5.5 something.
Well, 5.56 is the millimeter. It's the same. 5.56 millimeter is the same as .223 caliber. It's essentially the same.
It's the same. It's the same. Okay,
NATO round 5.5. It's just NATO does by millimeter, and again on a technical level, there is actually a difference between a 5.56 barrel and a .223 barrel and ammunition, but effectively they're the same. But But again, those are coming from that's considered a small rifle round.
Yeah, right.
Because it was designed to if before they were using 30-06, 308, they're using big
you
big
want
rifle.
standardized for the
and you
military.
want to standardize, but those rounds are so big, those are almost instant kill hits. You hit that person, that bullet would be instant kill.
Right.
And what they realized that if you kill one enemy, then you've eliminated one enemy. But if you wound one enemy, you've effectively taken 3 enemies out because it takes 2 of his buddies to carry him off.
Right.
So that's why they went with this smaller. One of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons that they went with the smaller 223 or 556 round was because it was on the lower end of damage by rifle rounds. So yes, compared to a pistol round, any rifle round is going to seem devastating. But yeah, so it is a small. It's on the lower end of rifle rounds, so they can carry more with them. They can carry more ammunition with less weight and stuff like that. But
so, my opinion, and I do not speak for all atheists because definitely there are a lot of atheists who are very pro-gun. Absolutely, they want whatever, and so I only speak exclusively for myself.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, I don't think we need those firearms to be in common public circulation where they are remarkably easy to obtain. I don't know what restrictions there are state by state. I know some states have more gun laws than others.
We live in California, which is,
Yeah.
as me, who is a gun owner, is a very frustrating state to live in.
Yeah, you're very limited.
I have already lived through here in California having to have my property forcibly removed.
Really?
I mean, I have owned guns long enough to where I have owned high capacity magazines, what they call high capacity magazines. They're actually standard capacity magazines. It's the standard capacity that is designed for the gun. But those have been now in California made illegal. Like I've had to get rid of them or sell them or remove them from out of state from my possession. So what I was legally able to own and what I broke no law with has now been forcibly outlawed and forcibly removed from my possession.
Well,
for
now,
doing
wait
no
a
wrong.
minute. Forcibly removed. Like the police kicked down your door, put you in cuffs, and took these out of your...
If I do not give them up and I am caught with them.
If you do not, but you gave them up.
Yes.
So they were not forcibly removed. They were removed by law.
Which is by force, by threat of force.
Well, there is a coercive threat.
Yeah.
I agree, but okay.
I was not physically forced to, but I was forced to.
I'm keeping you honest here. Is this a little bit of hyperbole?
A little bit of hyperbole,
Okay.
but in semantics, yes, I was. If there was no law, I wouldn't have done it. So the law forced me to do it. So I was forcibly made to do it.
Okay.
Nobody physically forced me. I was not restrained.
Why should we allow people to have these standard capacity magazines and these types of fire? Why should we allow it?
Why shouldn't we? Hold on.
Right.
The Constitution guarantees the right. So the onus is upon you to prove why we shouldn't.
Okay, well, I can show, when we're having a school shooting almost every week, or when we're having multiple mass shootings per year.
And I am so not going to even try to do that debate of there was not 18. That's
right. And I agree there was not. But we have way more than happen in any other country that's basically not a war zone. If you look at any industrialized Western country, which I think are the ones we need to use for comparison, I would include in that, of course, Australia, any place in Western Europe that's industrialized, the UK, Canada. Those
Tell me about
countries.
But those, how different are the provincial laws compared to the federal laws in those countries?
I don't know.
Do their individual states have different laws compared to the country?
Yeah, I understand the question, but I don't know.
And just in case somebody else didn't understand.
I don't know if... I imagine gun control is usually a federal level thing, where the Parliament of the UK is going to enact a ban, and that's going to override.
I'm saying on a general level, is there as much states' rights in those countries as there are in the United States?
Probably not.
So if we were to compare,
I could be wrong. But I don't think so.
So you're comparing a nation that likely does not have disparaging, not disparaging, but whatever the word is, where there's quite a bit of difference between individual territories or states or provinces, like the United States has. like, where California is very anti-gun, whereas another state is not, like Texas and all these other states. So you can look at a country like Australia that has mostly a unified set of laws, and you can compare that to a country like the United States that has very different provincial, province, state laws. And you can compare the countries as a whole and get an answer that is not quite accurate. Because we can pull, I don't know, 10 or 12 states in the United States that have very loose and open gun laws that equal the populations of the entire countries of Australia or England, and discover that in those states there are fewer gun violence than even in those countries with the same amount of population, but with different gun laws. But then you have other places that are more densely populated that have, major urban centers. I mean, I read
Right,
this.
you look at Chicago, right?
Well,
You guys like to throw Chicago out
Well,
there.
no, I'm just saying major city
yeah,
centers.
wow.
But between Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York is over half of your gun violence just in those three cities.
Yeah.
So you have a nation of 300 million people being judged by the actions of three cities.
Okay, well, here's my point is there seems to be a firearm, like the AR-15 commonly comes up. It's commonly used. It seems to be a weapon of choice for whatever reason.
Because it's the most popular gun in the country.
Okay.
Why wouldn't it be?
And
the
it's
choice?
exceptionally lethal. And why do we need
I'm sure
to
there are more.
have
I'm
that?
sure there are more drunk driving accidents done in Honda Civics than
Okay,
any other
but
car.
there's a red herring. We're not going to follow the red herring. We're talking about the firearms.
No, but
I want to get my
you're-
facts straight, which is part of the reason why I'm.
I know, but what you're doing is that you are saying why this gun, and I'm saying it's the
That's a
most
great
it's the
question.
most popular gun. Of course, more crimes
What's
are going to be
it
committed
used
with
for?
this. More crimes are going to be committed with this gun because there's more of them out there. That doesn't.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That's not part of the reason why it's evil.
Is it used for hunting? What's it used for?
It's used for everything. Yeah, it's used for hunting. People use it for hunting. People use it for target shooting. People use it. It's just a popular gun. Again, like a muscle car, like a Camaro or whatever muscle cars are out there, a Mustang. There were so many of them made. They're so easy to modify, so easy to personalize them. You can make them whatever color you want. You can put whatever furniture you want on the front and the back. You can make the barrel length whatever you want. You can buy there's probably 1,700 different kinds of stocks you can buy and grips and different colors. And you can customize it for yourself. I've seen, pictures online of people who bought one for their daughter and the gun is all pink with, pink and
the
something.
Tiffany's version.
Yeah, or
I've
it's
seen
all
the
bejeweled
pistol,
or whatever. It's just and it's so relatively inexpensive.
Yeah.
And the things that make it customizable are so relatively inexpensive. It's just the most popular gun to trick out. You say like people get their Honda Civic and put the wings on the back and the air dams on the front and the different, and you can buy all these different things. I can go out and buy parts to modify a Honda Civic, but it's very difficult for me to go out and find parts for my 73 914 Porsche.
Okay.
You're not, you know what I mean? You're not gonna find parts and you're not gonna find as many of them on the road. But there's probably not as many car accidents in a 73 914 Porsche as there are in a Honda Civic.
I think if there's going to be any kind of talk of legislation, I don't think you can legislate against a particular brand because it's
They
not
tried
the
that in
brand.
California. They didn't
Yeah,
work.
the brand isn't
30
what's
years
causing the harm. The harm that I think is coming from the muzzle velocity. It's basically the capability of the firearm combined with the ammunition. So if you're going to legislate something, you have to say that all firearms of a particular class that fire particular ammunition with a particular lethal effect and above have to be subject to some kind of restriction. And I think that's common sense because...
But I think that's already been stricken down constitutionally.
It probably has been. But we're here to talk about kind of what should be, not what is, because that's how you get to what is. First, you decide there has to be some kind of consensus on what should be, and then you change the Constitution to fit that. The Constitution has changed multiple times, just so everyone knows. The Constitution is an amendable living document.
And here is where I will get all the hate mail from all the people who believe with me, in that I sit here and say, then change the Constitution.
Which may very well happen in the next generation.
That's why. Here's the thing: if the Constitution no longer guarantees me the right to have a firearm, then there goes my argument to have a firearm.
Right.
I don't have
Right.
any legal standing. Yes, I do believe I still have a moral standing for protecting myself, but legally I would no longer have a standing. The problem is, like you said, it's difficult to change the Constitution. So most people against firearms want to find an end around, which is a cheap shot.
You can do interpretations and stuff,
Yeah.
and I don't think that's a cheap shot. That's how the document is supposed to work. That's how the Supreme Court is supposed to work. But remember, the Constitution once upheld slavery. It once meant that women were basically regarded as property and could not vote.
And they changed the
And we've
Constitution to do
changed
that.
it.
So change the
And
Constitution. That's what I'm
we've
saying.
also done
change the
things
Constitution
where-
and stop trying to take away my rights.
Right, where we can legislate, and there's also legislation from the bench, basically, where the judge says we can interpret this amendment to mean
And
this
I don't believe in
particular
that
theme.
any direction. I don't believe that towards. I don't believe.
But
that
that's how the
legislation-
system works.
It's not. That's not the way it's designed to work. It's not the way it's supposed to work.
Well, but
again,
there are constitutional experts who would disagree with you.
it wasn't. No, it
It's
wasn't.
debatable.
It's debatable. It wasn't designed to legislate.
And
from the
functionally,
bench.
day to day, that is how it works.
That is what it is, but we're
Okay.
not talking about what it is. We're talking about what we want to make it to be.
Okay, there you got that one. You're right. Okay,
So that's what I'm saying. It's like, do the right thing.
right.
Your side, your belief of gun control. Do the right thing. Change the Constitution.
Well,
do the right
here's,
thing.
here's
Don't
what I
quit
think we
trying
need
to
to
do the wrong thing.
Whether it comes about through constitutional amendment or federal law or what have you, here's my proposal. Okay, I recognize the value of having a widely armed populace as a hedge against government tyranny. Now, I would argue that the government has largely become corrupt. The republic is basically kaput because we can convert money into political power so easily. And we've created a plutocracy in this country where the wealthy basically make the law and the rest of us are just kind of along for the ride. And the firearms have not stopped that type of tyranny from developing in this country. So I think that's a huge issue. And I think that's the number one
It's
political
a different
issue.
kind of tyranny than was ever really faced
Right,
by the founders.
right. It's not, the king's troops are coming and so on. Nonetheless, it's still a big deal. Beside that, I do recognize that having an armed populace has some value. I like the idea, and I don't like the idea that my friend has to give up his property. I believe that you are the very definition of a responsible gun owner, Scott. And I don't like the idea that somebody would break into your home and take your firearm or what have you and so on, or that you would be forced to give up something that you cherish and enjoy having just because somebody else out there has done something evil or bad or what have you, however you want to characterize it, evil. So here's my solution, though. I recognize also the statistics, and the statistics say if you have a firearm in the home, you're more times, I think it's like 11 times, but I'm speaking off the cuff. I don't have a citation. But you may be up to 11 times more likely to have that firearm used in a suicide, involved in an accident, or to shoot a loved one who's coming home late at night or what have you, for some kind of error to be made or for the firearm to be turned against you, than you are to stop a perpetrator.
Is that a reason enough? Hold on. Is that reason enough?
It depends on the goal, and that's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
If the goal is to, at the end of the balance sheet, save more lives than you lose, then yes, that's absolutely reason enough because
Is that
you're
the
looking
goal?
at a spreadsheet and you want the number to be in the black, not in the red, or
So
as much in the black as possible. or
Is
what
that
have
the
you.
goal?
If that's the goal, if that's the decision rule, then yes.
Okay.
Then you would take these out of the home.
I don't believe.
But I
that
have
that's
a
the goal.
solution.
Hold on, but I don't believe
Okay.
I don't believe that's the goal. I believe that's the goal people are aiming for. I don't believe that's the goal that is morally correct.
Okay.
I don't believe that because if the goal is safety, then so many rights can be removed for the name of safety.
Yeah, why not just put us all into the Matrix, right? That's
Yeah.
a pretty safe
Yeah.
environment, right? The Matrix. You're plugged in, you're in a little pod, and
Yeah,
no harm, right?
But
I get that.
Again, going to statistics, statistically speaking, I did the math on all this. I did the math on guns compared to households. There's 300 and some odd million, 330 million guns estimated in America, but really there's only about 30 million households that have guns because it averages about 10 guns per household.
Wow.
On average. I know that I have 7.
Wow. Okay.
So, but they're not all accessible and
Of
they're
course.
stored
Yeah,
they're stored
yeah.
properly and stuff like that. But I'm just saying, on average, there's people who have 500 guns. It's
Mm-hmm.
not they have whatever their collections are and stuff like that. But again, on average, statistically, because you mentioned statistics, statistically speaking, compared to how many people, just accidental deaths, just talking accidental deaths, compared to how many guns there are, how many households there are, how many people die per year on accidental deaths, which is what you were talking about, unintended accidental deaths where someone accidentally kills himself, a kid gets a hold of the gun, how your thing is seven times more deadly if you have a gun in your home. You are 300 times more likely to die in your swimming pool than by your gun.
So we should outlaw swimming pools too. Okay.
No,
I'll add that to my list.
I'm just saying.
Now we know.
If you want to go statistically speaking, the goal is at the end of the balance sheet, there's fewer people dead, and that you are 300 times more likely. It's 300 times more likely for a child to die in your swimming pool than to die by your gun. 300 times more likely.
Okay. Now, when we look at the cause of death of Americans on an annual basis, I don't know how many people drown in swimming pools every day. It may be a couple, 2 or 3. But I'm certain that way more people on an annual basis die from gunshot wounds.
If you're comparing all in all, yes.
Okay.
So 30 some odd thousand people die every year from gunshot wounds. Statistically speaking, 17,000 of those are self-inflicted suicide. Statistically speaking, about 8,000 or 9,000 of those is by gang-related violence, gang-on-gang related violence. So it's not even this is perpetrator on perpetrator.
I'd like to eliminate that too, actually.
Yeah, but again, these are not accidental deaths. These are not when you actually get down to accidental deaths, it's about the same. About 3,000 people a year. 3,000 people a year die in drownings, about approximately. If I look this, and about the same. About 2,000 or 3,000 people a year die of accidental gunshot deaths. So it's about
and we
the same.
do have laws.
There are
swimming pools.
thousands. Yes,
You gotta have gates.
And there are thousands of
Yeah.
times more guns than there are swimming pools, and yet the death rate is about the death.
But
the death
one
total
swimming
is
pool
about the
serves
same.
a whole family.
So does one gun.
Okay. All right. So here's my proposal. I do want to get to my proposal.
And again, this is just based on gun households. On average, each household has 10 guns. So you multiply that times 10, and now you're 300,000 times more likely to die in a pool compared to being killed by a gun.
Okay. So,
So
my proposal, though, I want to get to my proposal here. This
Okay.
is something I really want to pitch because I want this idea to kind of spread. I want people to think about this and discuss.
What we'll do is you give your proposal, and we'll give the audience a chance to think about it and respond for our next podcast.
Perfect.
You get the last word.
Oh, wow. Okay. My proposal is this,
No.
that...
So that's the end of it.
Well, that was that.
Somehow the camera just ran out of tape.
Oh, I thought it was digital.
Dang it.
The gun clubs, private gun clubs. I think if you have a private gun club, and it's private to the degree that it can be. Obviously, there will be some federal regulation and oversight, but I want as little of that as reasonably possible. The private gun club sets all of the rules for its members. It can decide who it takes and so on. It does the background checks. It sells the ammunition and everything. You can even have more firearms and more high-capacity magazines and all these stuff that are normally outlawed. You could theoretically have it because now everything's at the gun club. So what happens is your firearms are not stored at home. There would probably be certain exceptions. Certainly people who live in rural areas who need a firearm because you live on a ranch or you live out in the country somewhere and you need a firearm for various reasons. There would be people who have exceptions. There would be an exception for concealed carry because if you're getting a concealed carry permit, there's probably a good reason for that. I don't think they hand them out like candy.
They do not.
And
At least not in California. California is a may issue state, so they can determine. There are some states that are shall issue. That as long as you pass the background check and pass the safety test and stuff like that, they have to give it to you.
So there would be some exceptions, but by and large, especially these weapons like the AR-15 and these weapons that have particularly high lethal capacity, I should say. I'm sure some people quibble with that statement, but they have to be stored at the gun club. They can't ever leave the gun club. If they do, it's being shipped by FedEx from one gun club to another. And then the gun club can organize shooting events where you can go hunting and stuff like that, and you get up on the bus and you go hunting together or what have you, or there'll be some procedure established where you and friends can get together and go hunting or what have you. But these firearms are never stored at home. They're just not. And that way, they're not in the hands of people who are mentally unbalanced. They're not in the hands of children. They're not in the hands of people who would be mass shooters. You can have a collection, but it's at the club. So there's some oversight. There's somebody where you're checking in, you're checking out, you're signing off, and you're not taking the firearm out the door.
So it's very similar. It's very similar then. It would be very similar to how machine guns are treated. Automatic weapons are treated in this country in that I can go, there's 3 or 4 gun stores, clubs, if you want to, in Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
Where
I've been to one. Yeah.
Where I can go and spend this amount of money and shoot a machine gun. It'd be something similar to where, except it would be a gun that I own. I could go to this location. It'd be mine. Go in, check it out, boom, get it, participate in that. But you're only speaking about this for these certain types of like a home defense shotgun is not what you're talking about.
Probably not. Well,
but even like a bolt action,
yeah.
A lot of hunting people do bolt action. So even a bolt action rifle to go deer hunting, you're not really talking about that. You're talking about something that can take a magazine, something that can take multiple rounds, something that could be possibly multiple deadly because of its capabilities of firing multiple times.
I don't know where we draw that line, Scott.
Okay. But
that's something for people who know more about this than I do.
But that's something you would reasonably
yes.
compromise on.
Yes, absolutely. Gotcha. And then the I forgot.
My nodding doesn't mean that I agree with him, but I agree with the concept that we can discuss it.
The cool thing about this, though, is it does maintain a local public arsenal. So that in the event of, let's say, America is somehow invaded someday or some nightmare scenario unfolds,
there's only one place that the enemy has to go to get all of our guns. Yeah,
yeah. I think the public would get there first. I think the public would get there first. It might be a little bit of Lexington and Concord kind of a thing, but I do think
which is exactly what that was. That first shot fired across the bow was the British going to
seize the arsenal.
Yeah. But, so there is no precedent for my argument then, huh? That the enemy would go for.
Oh no, I agree that's a risk, but since there would be probably dozens of these in the average city, good luck, federal government. And you have to also understand if the federal government ever became tyrannical, I don't think all of the military would sign on to that. I don't think all of your police or law enforcement would sign on to that. If we ever get to that point, there really is going to be a civil war, and it's going to be fought all the way from the top on down. Yeah. It's going to be a pretty
and none of us
terrible
hope for that.
thing. None of us want that. None of us want that. And
there are a few crazy gun people who talk about, let's do it. I'm like, no.
Yeah, we don't want that at all. But that's kind of my opinion. So I don't necessarily think we have to remove all firearms from society. I think we can be reasonable about it, but I do think we have to do something, and that something has to be substantial. And I do think there's a way we can do something substantial without completely shredding the Second Amendment in this country.
I said I was going to let you have the last word, but I lied.
Okay.
No, just based on what you just said. I've had a discussion with somebody else. I very much disagree that we have to do something. I feel we have to do the right thing.
Well,
any fool can do something. Let's just do something. No, let's not do something.
Right.
Let's do the right thing. So
okay, I would agree with that. Of course.
This is your proposal for what could possibly be the right thing.
Yep.
Again, a valid answer at gmail.com. Let us know what you think of Marshall's proposal. You can say, Scott, you should have said this. You can say, Marshall, you should have said this. But I think that was the first one to get under our belt. We actually had a gun debate, and there was no blood on the walls. There's no my fist isn't scarred up from pounding his nose in or anything like that. We did not call each other names, and by golly, we didn't even cuss. So it is possible. Until next time, this has been A Valid Answer.
Thank you.